Well, that's a fine how do you do. What was it you think got us the boot? Stealing the Queen's cash? Blowing up her summer shack? The beatdown at the bar? Whatever it was, you really ticked off the big boss this time. I don't think they're gonna let us back in.
No!
Well, there's two things that solve every problem. Money and explosives. I've got an idea! Boom! Gotta get money, gotta get bumped, gotta get home to Junkertown! I can't wait to see the look on the Queen's face when she sees exactly who double-crossed her! So we're gonna go over the plan one more time, so you don't screw it all up! All right, first, we light the fuse! Then, we put on our inconspicuous disguises and sneak into town. After that, we get our glorious blinged-out boom trolley right up to the boss's place, reveal our ingenious deception, and boom! They'll never see it coming! Oh, right! We need an escape plan. Take two. Light the fuse, inconspicuous, sneaking through town, front door, reveal our deception, then run like hell and boom! It's foolproof. Right! The gold! No point in blowing it up, so... Use inconspicuous trolley, front door, reveal, grab the gold! And... Boom? Whatever you do, don't blow it. Inconspicuous.
Who is it?
Don't run and roadhog!
Oi, hit the road, mate!
Idiot.
It's Junkertown! Da 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 da.
Oh my goodness. Hello everybody, how you doing? Welcome to the third in-game cinematics panel, Junkertown, the plan. The plan. Because it's about making the plan? Yeah. My name is Chris Evans. Yeah. Wait. No, not that Chris Evans. Yeah, no, middle-aged supervisor at Blizzard, not... Like you're expecting a chocolate sundae and you get butterscotch and it's the sugar-free stuff. You make of it what you will. All right, before we begin, let's meet the panel. First off, my very good friend, Taryn Gregory. Yep, Taryn is one of our in-game project directors. You guys know his work? Some of you? Okay. Does a lot of work on World of Warcraft, directing the in-game content. Next, we have Julie Brom. Yeah. So, Julie is an R&D engineer dedicated to the in-game cinematics department. She heads up development, making the in-game pipeline work with all the different game engines that we use. Now, we have a very special guest with us today. I'm very honored to welcome Ryan Green. Yeah. Ryan is a principal engineer for the Overwatch team. He was one of the architects of the bizarre modifications we asked for to make the Overwatch engine function as a cinematics tool. And we're going to be hearing from Ryan and Julie about that a little later. But first, I want to welcome back to the BlizzCon stage, Hunter Grant. Yeah. Hunter is an animation supervisor for the Blizzard Cinematics team. He's worked with our department for many years and is responsible for a lot of the innovation and optimization of our character performance workflow. And he's going to show you some of the results of that and talk about the really fun stuff the animators got to do working on the plan. Next, Jim Zhang. Yeah. So Jim is the lead technical artist for the in-game cinematics team. His job is to solve all those strange technical problems that crop up during production and improve the artist's workflow. So Jim's going to give us a behind the scenes of some of the cool artist-facing tools used in this cinematic. And finally, we have a new member of the in-game cinematics team, Dan Wallace. Yeah. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Chris.
So Dan is an amazing modeler and lighter who joined the IGC team last year, and he's going to talk about the artistic challenges he had to overcome working in this new engine to hit the look that the game team was asking for. So, I mean, something I want you guys to keep in mind today is this concept of teamwork. So it's very easy to take for granted the images that you see on the screen. And when it was first released, there was sort of a little bit of confusion because people were expecting an Overwatch cinematic, right? But they're like, well, is this from the regular cinematic pipeline or was this made in some other tool, right? And so they didn't understand that this cinematic was created in a completely different pipeline than the episodic content that you've seen before this, right? So this was actually a collaboration between the in-game cinematics department and the Overwatch team. And our goal was to create this nimble 3D content creation pipeline that's entirely built around the Overwatch engine. And this meant a lot of customization and modification of an immensely complicated piece of software that is the Overwatch engine, which at its very core is not designed to make movies. So we had to build in about 5 months what had actually taken us years to do with the World of Warcraft engine. And this panel is going to talk about how that happened. But first, I want to introduce you to the in-game cinematics department so you sort of have like a little bit of a foundation to start from. We have about 25 team members. Yeah, we have about 25 team members. Our staff includes project directors, producers, video editors, character environment modelers, technical artists, R&D engineers, effects artists, lighting artists, cinematic cutscene artists. They work in the engine doing real-time content. And in addition to that, we'll work with anybody from like 5 to 15 of Hunter's team, depending on our workload. So we're like a self-contained high-speed cinematics department nested within the larger Blizzard cinematics department. We utilize a lot of their tools, but have simplified and streamlined some of their workflows so that their applications suit our schedule and our style of working. But the thing that truly makes us different, we use Blizzard engines and game team assets to create our content. And as I promised earlier today, you're going to hear the story of how we added the Overwatch engine to our pipeline. So let's start out by hearing about the story and how that got developed. And for that, I'm going to turn you over to Taryn Gregory. Taryn, please take the stage.
Hello, BlizzCon. How are we all doing today? Good? Thank you so much for coming out today or tuning in at home. Does anybody happen to know what day it is? No. It's a perfect day for some mayhem, is what it is, right? We're going to tell you today a little bit about the story development involved in Junkertown, the plan, what it was like to bring this absolutely chaotic, crazy, wonderful movie to life from 0 to 60. So at the beginning of this year, 2017, the Overwatch team came to us and said, we would love if you guys could make a movie for us for our new Junkertown map to be revealed at Gamescom in Germany. And immediately I was like, oh my gosh, it's Junkertown, it's Junkrat Road. I was so flipping excited to work on this movie, but there was only one catch. The map didn't exist yet. And as Chris was saying, we're an in-game cinematics division. Our strengths are built on working with what exists that the game teams have already created. Well, there wasn't a lot yet, so we were going to have to use not just our logistics, but also our storytelling acumen to be able to properly set up a story that we would be able to create in the time that we have with the resources that would be available. So we took a look at what we were going to have for this movie. We were going to have Junkrat and Roadhog, which is just awesome. Two of my favorite characters. Any Roadhog mains in the audience? Roadhog? Yeah? Yeah? How about Junkrat mains? Yeah, me too. This is a safe space for Junkrat mains. Awesome. So we have these two characters to work with, and we had this concept art from the game team, who is just starting the map, and this was the outside posterior of the destroyed Omnium factory, which used to be creating the Omnics, and now is completely overrun with Junkers. That just sounds awesome, right? Also in the setup, Michael Chu from the game team let us know the Queen of Junkertown had taken over the place and laid down her decree and said, troublemakers will be exiled. Well, you know for sure who's going to get exiled first. And so during their exile from their hometown, they went on a worldwide heist spree, stealing everything they could get their hands on, money, explosives, gold, and returned with this, the payload. And I took one look at this concept art that the team sent over, and I was like, wow, that thing's really cool. It's got like money and gold and Pachamaris and dynamite and wait a minute. What is he trying to do? Is he trying to pay off people? Is he trying to blow people up? And oh, I started to understand for a moment what Junkrat's brain is really like, you know? I think somewhere in there, he doesn't actually know which one he's going to do yet. He's going to keep you in suspense until the moment, whatever he feels like. So at this moment, we had a good idea of the premise, good idea of the setup, and the Junkertown map was looking probably something like this. So we decided, yeah, that front gate, we know that's going to be unchanged. By the time the need to render the movie comes around, that will be unchanged. So Junkrat, Roadhog, gate. Now, time to find the hook. With that as our premise, we need to come up with what is going to be the thing that makes this actually a story instead of an event, right? And we had to create some conflict, because the only two characters throughout the movie are Junkrat and Roadhog. And while they're a dynamic duo and best friends, we needed to create some conflict. And the seed of all conflict is when someone wants something and can't get it. What does a pyromaniac want? To blow stuff up, right? I mean, blow everything up. And so we did our first modification, and Dan here actually added a physical fuse to that payload, which facilitated the main gag that became the narrative backbone of the entire movie. And that's that Junkrat just wants to light the fuse! But Roadhog won't let him. And now we have a wonderful dynamic by which we can extrapolate, okay, we have some tension, we can play off this, add the rule of threes, come up with a great story. And we continue to develop that with our incredibly talented staff of writers that we use in creative development, and moved forward as we got the pitch together. One other thing that we were considering was that the Overwatch series, up till this time, had been these wonderful movies created by Blizzard Animation that mostly dealt with subjects that were really heavy and really emotional, and I admit some manly tears have been shed on more than one occasion. But this movie was going to be different. So we added a super awesome title sequence to remind everyone, and this was the storyboard, right? Super awesome title sequence. That this was going to be a fun adventure. This was going to be a cartoon, and we wanted it to feel like it was a cartoon. And so in developing the introduction to our own little Junkertown series, we also came up with what was one of the core things of magic, I think, in this, which was, of course, gotta get money, gotta get bombs, gotta get home to Junkertown! You know, and of course, Australia, we love Australia. Any Australians here? Anyone? Yes! Oi, 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 right? Yeah, that's the thing? Yeah, okay. So next up is pitching the story. Once we've developed the pitch that we like, it's time to go back to the Overwatch team and let them know what we've come up with. Throughout the years, I've pitched many stories to many of the game teams, and they're usually like right down the Blizzard main line, right? Like big epic characters doing big epic things. Nothing could be farther from that than this pitch. And so I started to get a little nervous, right? I mean, doing something this wild and crazy, it almost felt like it was too left field for Blizzard. So we needed to get their blessing as soon as possible. And that meant going in front of the game team with no storyboards, no time, no script, just me. And I had to get up in front of Jeff Kaplan and Michael Chu and the rest of the Overwatch team and become Junkrat. I proceeded to act out the entire film from beginning to end, from, oh, that's a fine, how do you do? I've got an idea! We light the fuse! You know, that's a good point. Take two. yeah, bling, bling, boom, trolley, right up to the boss's blood. You know, it was great. Had a lot of fun time with it, just going right off the handle, right up to the moment where he blows everything. Idiot. Which is kind of what I was feeling like, because once I finished the pitch, I'm like, oh my God, I just did that in front of Jeff Kaplan. I'm gonna get fired. But luckily, they loved it. It went over really well, and we pitched the story a few more times, and we got the green light. Oh my gosh, we're gonna make this into a movie. This isn't really happening, but it was. So now it was time to move into storyboarding. And storyboarding is, as I'm sure you know, a wonderful process where we explore the visualization, and we set up the visual gags and the facial performance, and we time it out and make sure all the jokes and gags are landing just right. And as you can see here, it really looks almost exactly like the final picture, all the way down to some of Junkrat's expressions and antics. They worked out really well, and Yui Kurita, the storyboard artist on this, had started at Blizzard as an intern, and he churned out this entire thing, and it was really, really, really impressive. So once we wrap this up, it's time for the rest of these guys to figure out how to actually make it into a movie. So thank you, everyone.
Click. Click it. Click,
Flip it.
Click it. Click it. Yes. Thank you, Taryn. All right, so if you're familiar with Taryn's other work, he's kind of a homicidal maniac. Yeah. So you come back in 3 years, I'm going to play some Overwatch. Well, you can't. Why not? Everybody's dead. Okay, so we have a story. That was awesome, Taryn. Thank you very much. Let's get down to the nuts and bolts of how we actually customized the Overwatch engine. And for that, we're going to need some engineers. Thankfully, we have two of the best with us today, Julie Brom and Ryan Green. Take it away.
Chris. So when we started this, I'd like to reiterate sort of that concept of teamwork. Our two teams, the IGC team and the Overwatch team, we hadn't really worked together in this capacity. We really had no pipeline to get things into the engine. And we had a very short period of time to actually accomplish this. So we worked together and we decided upon a couple of really basic things that we needed in order to make this a reality. Anything past that was just going to be gravy. So the first thing we did was to be able to capture images out of the engine. Second, we needed a way to get custom assets into the engine. And third, we needed the pipeline to hand them off to them. And custom cameras. So the first thing were buffers. That's what I talk about when I say images. And what a buffer is it's basically, for a frame, it's an image which represents some piece of data. And based on what that data is, it's going to look a little bit different. And we generate a whole bunch of these when we render an Overwatch frame anyway. This is what one of those shots might look like if we visualize just one of those buffers. We actually make dozens and dozens of this as part of our normal rendering anyway. And as you can see, they all code together to do lighting, all the post effects, translucencies, everything that's needed to make a beautiful frame of Overwatch. So once we've done that, now we need a way to get animations, models, all the custom assets that the cinematics team needs to make into the engine. And to that, we use TED. This is our tool TED. This is how we build pretty much everything in Overwatch. It actually is running a really lightweight version of the engine itself. And you can see here I have a preview map where I can load one of our shots. We can see that there's a camera. I can fly around in it. And I can preview this. And this gives the cinematics team the kind of iteration and turnaround that they need in order to have a close and rapid workflow. You can see here that I can visualize how that camera rotates over time. I can view through the camera, which helps give them a strong sense of what they're going to get in the end. There's also all these different tracks down there. There's obviously ones that represent Roadhog, Junkrat, but then other things too, like the payload, the match. You can see animations that play on them, and various things like that. So awesome. We now have a way to get images out of the engine, and we also have a way of getting assets into the engine. And both the client, the main Overwatch game that you play, and TED could work. So which one do we choose? And we decided to export all this in the client itself. And the reason was because we got to leverage a bunch of existing technologies that we had already written. For instance, our effects system actually drove the sequence capture in the very first iteration of it. Also, in later versions, the play of the game system is what we actually used to get these things playing back. And finally, this one's interesting. The movie recording system is pivotal for us to capture this data. And the reason for that is because we need fixed time step. And that's really important when you're dumping gigabytes onto the disk for every frame. This is a real-time video of me capturing just one of those buffers on my desktop PC at work. You can imagine when you're dumping dozens of these out, how slow it would be. Finally, the last thing that we needed to write from scratch was the new camera system. In Overwatch, cameras are usually tied specifically to one character. And here, we needed a new system where we could have a world space camera that gave them free control to do anything that they want.
So now we have images, we have assets and animation rendering out, and what do we do next? Well, we need to figure out a way to make a game engine not optimize its graphics. And how do you do that? Well, you forcibly turn the quality level up to 11. Behind me, you'll see an image of the lower quality that's supported by the engine. Notice the lack of shadows and decals. Here you see quality 11. We have high-resolution shadows, we have reflections, and we have 4K textures. This really adds a lot of life to the visuals. So next, what do? We break it all apart. We capture each one of the assets on its own layer to allow for unique manipulation of the assets in comp. This gives our compositors more control and more flexibility to work with. But how do we put it back together again? For that, we calculate an alpha. An alpha is kind of a cutout of the image and tells us which pixels go where in the image. As you can see behind me again, Junkrat needs to fit into the image right where the alpha is lining, so it's easy for us to put it back together. And here you'll see a breakdown of what our compositors did, each of the unique manipulations they did per asset to show you exactly the final look. So at this point, we think we're ready. We give it off to the animators and we say, let's have some fun. Let's give you a shot and let's go with it. So here's what the animators did for us. They had a really good time. They animated the whole thing. And we said, great, let's put this into the engine. We put it in the engine and we got this. We're looking pretty good, but then, apparently our field of view on the camera wasn't working quite right. So we went ahead and fixed that and we said, okay, we're good. Let's try this again. All right, animators, let's have another shot. So they picked one of their favorites. They went crazy with it. Hunter will go into it a little more for you later. And we had a lot of fun. So we said, cool, let's do it again. Put it in the engine, and Roadhog's mask is missing. Well, okay, we can figure that out. But then, okay, well, clearly something else is wrong. Apparently can't get that close to camera, and our animators busted right through it.
Yeah. So, it turns out that when we wrote this engine years ago, we thought in ourselves, no one would ever want to have their eyeball squished right next to the camera or have the camera zoom into someone's mouth. Well, turns out we're wrong about that.
Gotta love animators, always get into the dirty parts of it. All right, well, the next problem was, hey, that quality 11 turns out it's a little expensive. Our graphics cards that we were running with weren't quite cutting it. So in the middle of the night, we figured this out and we say, where do you get an upgrade on graphics cards in the middle of the night? Well, we snuck down to the render farm and slipped them out and add them into our machines, get ourselves back up and running. So, yeah, absolutely. At this point, we have successfully slowed down the real-time engine from 60 frames per second to 1 frame per second, which would make your play of a game take 15 minutes for you to watch. I'm sure you guys would love that. And then we took 5 terabytes of disk space, which is 5,000 gigabytes, but we also set up potential collaboration between our 2 engineering teams. So in the end, in a very short amount of time, we were able to capture images, put our custom assets and animation into the engine, render it all out with a pre-calculated alpha, and composite it all back together for the final look. All right, and back to Chris.
All right, thank you so much.
Oh, sorry.
That was awesome. All right. We have a story. We have buffers. We have an engine that goes up to 11, and we have a world space camera. Next, and this is really against my better judgment, I'm going to welcome back to the BlizzCon. It's just, you know, he's a supervisor, I'm a supervisor. The animation, the stories are good, but there's just, I don't know, whatever. Hunter Grant.
Thank you, Chris.
No problem, Hunter.
I believe your judgment's getting better every day.
Good.
So as you've learned, as Ryan has said, we like to break things. That's my team. So Taryn came to me one day and said, we're going to make a movie of Junkrat and Roadhog. Now, I was so excited because since we started these shorts, I've wanted to make a Junkrat and Roadhog movie. So going into this, I knew we were going to need Junkrat and Roadhog. I knew we were going to go big. We were going to do a comedy. So what I needed to do was make sure my team understood who Junkrat and Roadhog were. What makes them tick? What motivates them? So first we begin by always consulting the game team. Thank you, game team. We look over all the concept art to help inspire our artists. We look over all the animations they've already done, like the victory poses. It helps us get a sense of how the game team has actually posed them and who the character is. We look over the emotes. It gives us a great window into the character's personality and how they move. And of course, the play of the games, which are just epic. For example, Junkrats give you a great window into his absolute love and pure joy for all things that go boom. Now, generally, we want to start with the asset. We want to make sure we're one-to-one to what the game team has designed. Also, when we start with the asset, it helps us understand how far they have pushed Junkrat away from their bind pose to create who Junkrat really is. Now, as we start the animation process to arrive at results like you see behind me, we always want to start with reference. Now, reference is meant to be used as a guide. You can explore many, many ideas and get them out very, very quickly. Helps you get buy-off on your ideas. Now, Joe here went so far as to speed up his reference to help get buy-off to make sure he was the same style as what we were going for in the animation. Reference is also used to study how the body and face truly move versus how the mind's eye thinks it moves. Reference is also used to discover ideas that you might not necessarily think of. Little imperfections, little nuances to help us create a more sincere and genuine performance. Now, Brad here throws himself into the performance. He becomes Junkrat. And as you can see, the results truly translate into the final performance. Now, the fun story about this in particular video is that at one of the takes, Brad threw himself so much into Junkrat, he actually passed out during one of the takes. So in order to achieve the snappy action and the style that the Overwatch team has created for us, we need to create smear frames. Now, what's a smear frame? A smear frame is a term from 2D animation that's meant to fake motion blur. We have motion blur. How we use it is to control the motion blur. We use it to help guide your eye to create these lines of action, so these very, very quick motions that we're creating, your eye can follow. But the rule we tend to follow is you want to be able to feel the smear, not see it. If you see it, you kind of loses it. But it isn't until you slow down our animation you actually get to truly see how far we stretch these characters. Now, please keep a close eye on Junkrat. Did anybody catch it? You see, without these smear frames, the animation would still work. However, it wouldn't feel quite as snappy. It would feel a little stroby, and it would be hard for your eye to follow this very, very fast action that we're creating on screen. Now, I'll admit, this one is a little bit more subtle. However, once slowed down, it really does become my favorite. Now, lastly, before my time is up and I hand it over to Jim, and he tells you all about how we actually do all things, and he gives us all the magic, there are two things that solve every problem. First, at times animators write jokes. Second, there are times when said jokes need to be sold to a director who isn't quite buying them. Now, if you didn't catch what I mean, let me show you. See, one of our animators, James McCoy, decided to have Junkrat holding up 3 fingers when describing the 2 things that solve every problem. Now, when we did this, Taryn was actually out of the office, and we loved the gag. We thought it was hysterical. However, when Taryn returned, he watched the video, and he thought, that's odd. Why is he holding up 3 fingers? He's only saying 2 things. Something's wrong. So I said, wait, Taryn, come here. We sat him down, and we explained to him slowly that this was done for the purposes of humor. And then after a few very awkward, silent moments, he laughed. And thus a joke was born. Chris?
Thank you so much, Hunter. Oh my gosh. They're awesome. All right. Now we're going to take a look. You know that guy at the hardware store who just knows where everything is, how everything works, he can fix anything? That's Jim. Jim, take it away.
Thank you, Chris. Hey, everybody. Appreciate it. So when Chris came, he walked up to my desk and he said, we're going to make a Junkertown cinematic. We only have a couple months to do it. We don't have a pipeline. We don't have anything. So the first thing you feel is excitement. Then you feel terror. And then you feel determination. But we're going to do this because we're the IGC team. One of our advantages is that we can do things really fast. So before the animation team can start animating, the first thing we need to do is we go grab assets. So we go into the engine and we start shopping. So we look for things that we can actually reuse. So for instance, we have our main characters, Junkrat, Roadhog, simple enough, just a couple characters. But as the story starts to build, you get a couple more things. You need their costumes. Okay, that's not so bad. Those are skins that exist. Now we need variations. Okay, so these are start to become custom assets. You need some masks inside. You need some props. Okay, that makes sense. That's not so bad. And you start to add, and the list starts to build up. And for every one of these things, everything that is not the map itself, we have to make, if it doesn't already exist. Payload, for instance. Loot, you got to have loot. You know, Junkrat and Roadhog wouldn't be anything without loot. And even in the map, we have this little hatch at the very end. This minor thing, but didn't exist, so we got to make these. And then we got to make a door, and a gate, and a door, and another door. And even when we fly into Junkrat's mouth, you have to have a uvula. That didn't exist before, so we got to make that. And so in the end, we want to pull models, textures, and shaders. Now, these are the things that we want to primarily be able to reuse from the game. Some of them have to be a little modified. They're not, we can't use them straight out of the game, and here's why. So on the red here, you'll see this is the mesh that exists in the game, and on the right, the blue is what we had to modify. So for instance, his vest, in the game, it's actually part of his body. It's one contiguous mesh. So we need to separate these out. Because within cinematics, we have to have a lot more fine detail. You zoom into these characters, things that you don't typically see in the game. In particular, the face. We have to do quite a bit of modification to the face. You'll notice that topology, what I mean by that is the polygons, the points, where things are split up. So you'll notice that in Junkrat's face, we have the eyebrows are defined more clearly, the lips have a few more edges, and we have a very standardized face that we use for the animators because we don't want them confused too much. They frighten easily.
I fear easily.
They get scared. And so once we get these meshes, it's just a sculpture. It doesn't mean anything. So the first thing we need to do is we need to build a rig. Before they can animate, this is just a mesh. It's just a model. It doesn't mean anything. So then we add a skeleton. A skeleton is our basis for points of articulation. Where's the elbow? Where's the wrist? Where's the knee? Things that seem pretty simple, but actually like a lot of detail makes a great impact. So next we add limbs. So a limb for us could be a spine. It could be a leg, arm, hands. But in the sense for a rigger, it means a grouping of controls, because the controls are what the animators finally get to play. We are effectively building the action figure that the animators get to play with. So we build the toys. And the face, in particular, is really complicated. So in the end, for Junkrat alone, I have 78 limbs and 524 controllers. That's a lot. That's a lot for any animator to go in and mess with. That's unreasonable in the amount of time that we have for this production. So what we do is, what the rig does is it does automation. And you'll notice in this case here, that zigzag controller, that's the clavicle. And when you just move that single controller, all those little bombs, all those things kind of move along with it. That automates those things. And so it gives a lot of freedom to the animators to really focus on the things that matter. For instance, performance. We don't really care about the kind of like physics of the little nitty-gritty. And another feature of our limbs are the bendy limbs. So you notice here I'm grabbing the hand, yanking it out, it stretches. And these bendy limbs, these are the features that allow us to create these really beautiful smear frames. And we have an IK system, so you'll notice I move the hand at the end, I can move the body, and it stays where it is. So this is an emote that I'm working on. I think we can get it into the game. I think it's fun. It's pretty good, right? All right. Yeah.
That's frightening, Jen.
I could be an animator. I don't think it's that hard. Another feature is the faces. So you'll notice here, I move the look at around, and you notice the little eyelids move around and kind of focus with it. So there are these little cubes for tweaks. it would be unreasonable for an animator to have to go through each one of these things and to try to sculpt a smile. So for instance, we have these larger controls. You move those, so when I yank that around, like all the little flesh kind of moves around in a sort of a realistic manner. There's a lot of automation that's built into the face in particular. In fact, the face is a standard feature that we use within cinematics across the board. So whether it be the pre-rendered Anduin or we do anything else, it's the same facial rig because we've done a lot of work. So I can sculpt these amazing faces. I think it's pretty good. I don't know. And you can also scale. For instance, these eyeballs can pop out. And you think, why would you ever need something like this? But we end up using it when he slams up against the camera, against the mask. And in the hands of our incredible animators, you get really cool poses. And you bring these lifeless sculptures to life. And you get this performance. And that's what Blizzard's all about, is actually creating these stories. Another feature that we had to figure out for the Junkrat cinematic were the effects. So we're used to doing these incredibly elaborate, big explodey kind of effects. But in the Overwatch system, we have these wonderful hand-drawn, very beautiful effects. They don't use a whole lot of complicated math, but they use a lot of art. And so we have, our artists draw all these by frame. That's our youngest Blizzard member right there. And so he goes through, and he actually opened up an old 2D animation book, went through it, and retaught himself 2D animation so that he could draw these frames, so that we could figure out that, this is what a candle flicker looks like. These are things that don't exist in the game we had to create. And then we had to create, when Junkrat blows out that candle, it's, flashes by in a split second. But this is what's actually required to do it. So we get all our elements together, hand it over to the animators. They do their amazing work. We cram it back into the engine, back into TED, and then we use our incredibly elaborate, advanced capturing system of hitting the button over and over again. So by the end of this, by the end of our very compressed schedule, we actually didn't have our farm capture system up. We actually had to do it by hand. So every shot we ran, and late nights, but in the end, we ended up delivering final frames.
Jim, thank you so much. How about that? All right, where are we? We got a story, we got buffers, we got an engine that goes to 11, we got world space cameras, we got smear frames, and we have a uvula. After all that, we still had a little time left. We thought, what should we do? I know, we'll give it to Dan. Dan, take it away.
Thank you, guys. I am incredibly excited to be here today to talk about some of the art and lighting behind Junkertown, the plan. So once all the great tools and tech we've been discussing were mostly in place, they came to me and said, Dan, make this look pretty in a week. Though really it was more like 4 days, but who's counting? So what you're seeing behind me now is a Planar-style time-lapse of the Junkertown map going through development. Once the map was content locked, I was able to jump in and light our shots without a fear of any drastic changes being made on the Overwatch team's end and having to start over from scratch. Though sadly this was the case, since the Junkertown map was in development while our tests were going on, which meant nothing we did was final until the map was finished. And I use the term final loosely, since we really worked on this thing till they physically removed our hands from the mice and put it on a plane to Gamescom. The Overwatch guys did a phenomenal job on the map, and it left me with a really great base to work with, just not a lot of time. So lighting a map usually starts with ambient light. This simulates light and color that would be created by the sky and helps fill in shadows so they aren't black. Using the sun as a key light, I would adjust that next, and then add point lights to help fill out certain areas. Lighting in real time within the Overwatch engine was a huge benefit for us this time around, because it gave us more accurate lighting information and great tools to work with. For me, it was about getting the characters evenly lit, but still keeping contrast while removing any harsh shadows or dark spots. Junkrat and Roadhog have so much life and personality that you really just want to let that shine. Though I will say that one of the most tricky aspects of this entire thing was not being able to see the characters in the environment as I placed lights. Let me explain. It was very much a guessing game, as I'd have to open up the shot to get an idea of where the characters were located, and then go back to the map that that shot was referencing and adjust the lights from there. Rinse and repeat. Not the easiest workflow. To save you guys from some of that agony, here's a breakdown of one of the outdoor shots with everything together. So here's what we get from the default Junkertown map. As you can tell, the characters are pretty dark. The sun and the ambient are there, but it just needs more love. I start by rotating the sun to brighten up the characters and to give them more readability. I then add a point light to amplify some of that sun and some of the bounce light that's occurring. Another point light is added to the front of the payload to help it stand out from the background. And another to the top of the payload, just to ramp up the overall brightness and to make things really pop. Finally, it's all run through compositing. Levels are adjusted, and the background is blurred to help you focus more on Junkrat and Roadhog. The boss's place was a bit different. We already got a great image to start with, but I really wanted to push what was there and tell a bit more of a story. I started by adding a point light to brighten up the area the sun was coming from for more contrast. I then added a cooler light to the interior to have the character stand out from the background, but to also give you a sense that you're traveling to a different area of the map, which continues into the next shot. Then I added a bluish light as a fill, adding highlights to the payload, and eventually running it through compositing for the final image. These things definitely really help differentiate the main locations we use within Junkertown. In addition to the lighting, I also create some of the assets that existed and some that didn't. We had an awesome back and forth between the Overwatch team and the entire production, and towards the beginning, Michael Chu approached us about amping up the payload for our piece. We really wanted to sell that it was just loaded with gold. There's a lot more gameplay considerations when something is used in-game, but because ours wasn't, we were able to really push the shapes and ideas to fit the story better. I made the gold mounds bigger, added coin edging, and doubled the money bags and explosives. Dynamite with a fuse was added to Dynamite with a fuse was added to the sides in the very early stages, which ended up being used by the Overwatch team on the in-game payload, not just our cinematic payload, which I personally thought was pretty awesome. Some of the new additions were the front gates, the inside of Roadhog's mask. But at the very end of the project, when it all came down to the wire, I was asked to make a surprise Pachamari face. You guys happen to catch that? I ended up making a few versions before we all voted on the one that we used in the shot. And I remember having just a few days left when the idea came to change the Pachamari's face for the explosion shot. And despite the insane amount of work we had left, we all kind of looked at each other with our super tired eyes and said, yeah, this is happening. And it was so. And now I'll pass it back to Chris to wrap things up.
That was awesome. Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much. All right, so there are two things to take away from today's talk. Is that still funny? Is it? All right, well, yeah, but you say the joke has legs, right? Legs. All right. So there are two things to take away from today's talk. One, there was cake. Yeah. Yes, as many of you know, cake is actually a huge motivator in the video game world. Yeah. Well, they got us this awesome cake for the wrap party for the plan, and we're so happy with how this cinematic turned out. You're happy with it? You're okay? All right, good. So obviously, the second thing is we're really looking forward to telling more stories with this technology, and we hope that's a possibility. You guys want some more? Should we do some more? All right. Well, we'll see what happens. And then finally, back to this idea of teamwork and the team. Yeah, there they are again. Hey, look, a Pachamari. Yeah. I want one. Back to the teamwork and the team that made this possible. I want to take a moment to thank all the people who helped make this happen. As I said previously, we did this in 5 months, and this was something that had taken us years to do with the World of Warcraft engine. And it was a massive amount of work. And there were many people on both the Overwatch team and the cinematics team that were absolutely critical to its success. And I just want to say we do this because we love these characters and the worlds they inhabit. Yeah, we do. It's true. And I think I speak for all of us when I say that I hope you guys do too. We hope you do too. Yeah? Good. Good. And you know, as always, we say this a lot, but we mean it because it's true. Thank you guys. You know, we wouldn't be up here without you. You're the reason why all of this gets done. All right? Woo! Thank you. Yeah. We won't be answering any questions from up here on this stage today. But we're gonna walk off the stage, we're gonna take off the mics, and then we'll be back out at the side of the stage, so come up and talk to us, meet us, please, we wanna meet you. We're super stoked. So thanks so much. Please, be good to each other. Be kind, right? Yeah. Have an amazing BlizzCon. Good night, everybody. Thank you.